The Addams Family Chronicles continue. Chapter 32. Who Let the Dogs Out? PETA wasn't in existence in 1974. Greenpeace was only in its infancy. But these organizations were founded out of a need to increase public awareness of important moral issues promoting a more just and verdant culture. These issues would take center stage for a band of bored juveniles in the spring of 1974, passing time together in rural Oklahoma on a cool Saturday afternoon. Now, small towns offer little excitement on weekends. Adolescents are too often left to their own devices, creating opportunity for mischief and vandalism. The gang in question, however, had no such criminal propensities, as they were all good students from good families. Actually, it was a 4-member gang this day, and included the Addams brothers, Keith and Eric, along with the Davis brothers, Mike and Steve. Their restlessness had taken them along the banks of Beaver Creek, which meandered through the local 9-hole golf course past the football field. It was said to be polluted, though there was no real evidence of that, other than the foul smell of sewer that was perceivable only on certain days of the week. This particular Saturday was not one of those days, however, and the 4 of them hiked along, occasionally stopping to skip a rock or pick up a wayward golf ball, presumed lost by its original owner. Not until they came up out of the ravine did they hear something that piqued their interest. It was the sound of dogs barking. Normally, barking dogs would not have seemed out of place, but the nearest house was several hundred yards away. It seemed to be coming from a small cinder block building behind the football field, between the 5th and 6th holes on the golf course. As the boys drew closer, the yelps and howls grew louder and more fervent, until they stood at the front of the enclosure, peering through the padlocked, chain-link gates that harbored the animals. It was the city dog pound, housing several dogs of different sizes, and their excitement at seeing the boys precipitated more barks and more whines. The group of boys stood silently, 4 abreast amidst the cacophony, slowly processing the situation before them. Young Eric was the first to speak. "Whose dogs are these? They don't look too healthy." His innocent question rang true as he pointed to the skinny, orange-speckled cocker spaniel standing on his hind legs, pawing at the chain links and panting excitedly. Dog dung littered the cement floor. "These are all strays. The dog catcher picks them up and puts them in here. Then if nobody claims them, they kill them." Mike Davis had insight that the other 3 were lacking. "You mean they're going to kill all these dogs? How do they kill them? Why?" Fear was apparent on Eric's face as he asked the questions the other boys were thinking. All heads turned to Mike again for answers. "Why? Because nobody wants them. They shoot them with a gun. After that, they dig a big hole and put them all in it. Then they cover it up with dirt so nobody knows about it." Mike's matter-of-fact rebuttal hung momentarily in the air, then fell abruptly, striking the boys dumb as they assimilated the information. Keith spoke next. "We can't let this happen." He picked up a big rock and began smashing it into the small-gauge chain and padlock that secured the gate. At first, the chain refused to budge, but after several blows, one of the links gave way, and the gate sprung open. The animals flooded from the pen across the sunny landscape along with their redeemers, frolicking in their salvation and running free in the spring afternoon, basking in the warmth of justice for all. There was something about the covertness of their deed that insisted on reticence. After all, the destruction of public property is a felony in most states. But on that day, one can argue that lives were saved and that the end justified the means. But the local paper told a different story on the front page. Vandals strike dog shelter. Over the weekend, vandals broke into the city dog pound, allowing several strays to escape. The property damage was considerable, and local authorities are still investigating. Many of the dogs being housed there should be considered dangerous. If you have any information leading to the prosecution of these vandals, please call the local sheriff's department for a possible reward. The boys would not speak of this again. Chapter 33. Man's Best Friend. Growing up without animals in the household is a recipe for disaster on many levels. Having a pet teaches young children responsibility in terms of the care that is necessary for these creatures to grow and thrive. It offers them their first clues about the birds and the bees as they observe reproductive rituals and witness the birth of their offspring. Pets afford young children an opportunity to learn their first lessons about the whole life cycle, life and death, loss and grief. But more than this, they give children love and companionship, tendered by the animals unconditionally. This is where our story begins. The Addams family always had pets: dogs, cats, cows, pigs, a raccoon, chickens, birds, goldfish, turtles, snakes, seahorses, sea monkeys, ant colonies. The list is almost endless. On any given day, the Addams children could be seen playing in the yard with any one of several dogs or cats. They each claimed ownership to at least one of them, naming them and caring for them, though most of the everyday maintenance of the animals fell squarely on Mom. It was expected, however, that the children take part in a modicum of their care, as their allowance was often tied to making sure the animals were ensured food to eat and fresh water to drink, as well as keeping the litter box free of foul-smelling excrement. A fresh litter box, as the children learned quickly, made Mom happy, and a dirty one wreaked havoc on both her disposition and the children's disposable income. Young Eric had a dog named Chiquita. He was a Chihuahua, white with black spots and a stubby tail, sired by his half-brother Taco, and nearly a carbon copy of him, though smaller and weighing maybe 5 pounds. His diminutive size, however, served him poorly in confrontations with many of the household cats, as scratches often adorned his nose. He was a very friendly dog, and all the neighborhood kids knew and liked him. They were especially impressed by his howling when young Eric would play his harmonica. But because of his thin gene pool, he had only one testicle and suffered from what Mom called fits. He was an epileptic, and his seizures were often witnessed by the children, filling their eyes with horror. But after a few moments of convulsing, Chiquita would awaken and resume his normal, friendly behavior, as if nothing had occurred at all. Mom seemed to understand this malady, and her reassurance was not unlike that of a physician to a patient. Sometimes dogs just have fits. Chihuahuas are especially prone to them. They're a very nervous breed. Mom's explanation made complete and utter sense to young Eric, as he often noticed how his dog would shiver with excitement each time he opened the door to the backyard and called him. Her words only consolidated the notion that this dog was the most unique in town. Chiquita lived in the backyard, which was encompassed by a wood stockade fence. It was not escape-proof by any means, and the dogs were seen on many occasions roaming free outside their enclosure. Freedom doesn't come without costs, however. The Addams family lived across the street from the buildings where the high school and junior high school students attended class. It was a simple walk across the street to school each day for the Addams boys. Young Eric was an 8th grader. On this day, he ate his breakfast cereal before walking out the back door with school books in hand. He patted Chiquita on the head and exited through the side gate, tuning out the chorus of barks and whines he had left behind the wooden fence. First period was band. This particular day, the band was practicing street marching. The homecoming parade was coming up, and Mr. Rickard, the band teacher, knew the band would have to be ready. He ordered all the members of the band out into the parking lot. When the drums started their cadence, the band members began their march out into the street. It wasn't long before little Chiquita was noticed. Young Eric broke stride to pick up his dog. The band director blew his whistle and the band stopped as a unit. "Little Adams!" He called Eric that because he was the third member of the family to have been in the band. He spit tobacco juice out of one side of his mouth before continuing. "Get that dog out of here!" Eric, holding Chiquita in one hand and his instrument in the other, galloped over to his house, opened the gate, and sternly slammed the gate shut, depositing the dog once again within the enclosure of the fence. He never broke stride on his way back to his spot in the second row, as the drum cadence began anew. And as they rounded the corner at the first block, musical strains of a John Philip Sousa march descended upon the neighborhood, as smiling, porch-sitting retirees waved and hearkened back to a simpler, less complicated era. It was in the lunch line when the news was broken to him. One of the seventh graders, Denise Webb, was bursting with gossip. "Is your dog okay?" She asked the question in a pointed, "did you know" sort of way, rather than in a sympathetic tone. "Well, what do you mean?" Young Eric was at her mercy now. Her eyes appeared to lighten as his question assured her that he had no knowledge of the information in her custody. He glanced around the lunchroom, only to notice many of his classmates look away from him, appearing to suddenly become uninterested in how he might react. "Your dog was over here at school a while ago, just before lunch period. Some of the boys were playing with him, and Mark Brown dropped him on his back. He wanted to see if your dog would flip over onto its legs like a cat does. But the dog just landed on his back and he didn't get up. They took him over and put him in your backyard." She seemed completely at ease telling this story, gratified that she had been the first to impart something to someone who didn't know it. Eric left the lunchroom and started across the street to his house, worried what he might find. He stepped to the side gate of the wooden fence and opened it. As he hurried through, he saw his dog, lying strangely still a few feet in front of him. As he drew closer, the fear crystallized into reality. He ran his hand over the fur of his fallen companion, hoping for any response, receiving nothing but a glazed stare in return. A million thoughts ran through his mind, but not a word did he speak. Sometimes it's better that way. After school that day, he found a box and buried him out and back underneath the Martin house. Chiquita was the only pet of his that received a proper burial. And after he tamped down the last shovel of dirt, he sat down and played the harmonica as Taco howled along. Over the years, he would think of Chiquita many times and wonder why his friend was taken from him in such a senseless manner. But in the great scheme of things, it really didn't matter. All that matters is that he mattered to a little boy, and that the life they shared together lives on in the memory of his master. Chapter 34. There's a first time for everything. Thanksgiving of 1974 was monumental for many reasons. America was digging out from beneath a political scandal which left an All-American football player from Michigan as our president. Muhammad Ali had just regained the heavyweight title from George Foreman. And Lucy, the 3.4 million year old skeleton of an extinct hominid species, had just been discovered. But it was a year of adaptation and acceptance for the Addams family, as change brought about by divorce ushered in a new era of visitation rights, where holidays would have to be shared between parents, separated by long distances. This would be the first holiday the boys would spend away from their mother, and the three of them embarked on the 4-hour journey to Tulsa to spend Thanksgiving with their father. Lynn was almost 20, attending college at the University of Oklahoma as a sophomore. He was a good driver and had gained enough of Mom's trust to be counted on to provide transportation for the younger boys in his 1966 Ford Fairlane 500. Keith was a senior in high school, and Eric was a freshman. Though the trip was long, it provided an opportunity for Keith and Eric to become reacquainted with their brother, having been away at college for more than a year. The three of them got along well, as they were three young men together, experiencing something for the first time with a common purpose. The Tulsa skyline came into view as the chilly November evening fell around them. Dad lived at the Yorktown Apartments, somewhere on the south side of Tulsa. The three of them pulled into the parking lot and got out of the car to stretch their legs before heading up the stairs to meet their father. A knock on the door was quickly answered by a smiling, excited face that only Dad could make. He kissed them all as they entered the door one by one. He wasn't alone, however, as a pleasant-looking young lady sat in an armchair in the scantily furnished living room. She was slim and well-dressed, appearing to be somewhere in her mid-20s. Dad introduced her as Donna, nothing more, and he proceeded to take their bags to a back bedroom down the hall. The evening was just getting started. Thanksgiving dinner was a bit disappointing that year. There was some leftover turkey and dressing that appeared to have been brought to the apartment from another Thanksgiving meal that had been served someplace else, possibly at Donna's or her parents' house. There was no dining room table, but it didn't seem to matter to the boys, who ate their leftover turkey and dressing from TV trays as they all sat together in the living room. Donna didn't eat, probably because she was still full from the first time the turkey was served. Nevertheless, Dad enjoyed spending this time with his sons, and he was thankful. After dinner, Dad poured drinks for the adults and brought Lynn and Keith a beer, without offering one to young Eric. After all, drinking age was 18. Because Keith was 17, and as such considered a minor in the state of Oklahoma, it prompted young Eric to ask for a beer himself. Dad hesitated, and in the moments that followed, there was some debate on the subject by the adults. But in the end, it was decided that young Eric would be allowed to drink a beer. A 14-ounce can of Old Milwaukee found its way into the eager palm of a grateful 13-year-old pubescent child to drink and enjoy with the men of the Adams family. It was a seminal event in his life and filled him with a sense of equality and peerage he had never before experienced, and the five of them enjoyed their time together. Now, the warm glow that alcohol elicits can gain momentum quickly. It wasn't long before their drinks were finished, and another round was proposed. There was no beer left, however, and the offer was made that they drink whiskey, as this is what the adults were drinking. Each of the boys poured themselves a drink from the bottle of Seagram's that sat on the kitchen counter. Lynn seemed to know a lot about mixing of these drinks, having been to many college drinking parties at the university. He suggested that young Eric might benefit from a mixture of whiskey and 7-Up in order to make the drink more potable. Keith, too, appeared to understand basic bartending principles, as Eric watched him first pour a careful jigger of whiskey over ice, and followed by a generous amount of 7-Up that filled the plastic highball-sized cup to the brim. Things were about to get interesting. As the evening evolved, it was only a matter of time before the alcohol began to surge through young Eric's nervous system and suppress any inhibitions that may have been present prior to his arrival. The adults began to notice his slurred talkativeness and, though entertaining, raised questions about whether to allow more consumption. Donna was the first to mention it. "Warren, He's not going to feel very well in the morning. That was a crazy statement from Eric's point of view, because he felt so good at this moment. He had lost count of how many drinks he had had, though by most accounts he'd had 3 or 4. The adults had also had that many and really weren't policing the alcohol consumption at all. And as the party continued, events became a blur, and the memories of that evening after Donna's statement were lost to young Eric forever. The next morning, Eric awoke on the floor of the back bedroom, wondering just how he'd gotten there. His mouth was full of cotton, and his eyes felt as though someone had thrown sand in his face. He remembered Donna's prediction, though he didn't recognize the symptoms he was having as a hangover. He got up and shuffled into the bathroom, catching a glimpse of himself in the mirror, wondering how dried toothpaste found its way onto his lips and chin. He hadn't brushed his teeth, had he? His head began to pound as he emptied his brimming bladder. Certainly, the alcohol had made him feel bad, but it was his guilty conscience that was making him feel worse. Those that hear this story might wonder why such a chain of events could have occurred at all. If you ask young Eric, he will tell you that this experience afforded him a life lesson at an early age. Others might disagree. But the simple truth is that most of us are under legal age when we experience many behaviors reserved for adults. No matter the age, there's a first time for everything. The asterisk to this story is that in America there are laws intended to keep children from drinking alcohol until 21 years of age. It is one of only a handful of countries worldwide that have such conservative laws regarding alcohol. In more than a dozen countries, there is no age limit. In Europe, most countries have established 16 as the legal drinking age, while the majority of the world's nations limit alcohol consumption to those individuals 18 years of age and older. However, in most states in America, parents are allowed to provide minors alcohol in the privacy of their own homes.